Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the University College Cork Study of Religions Research Seminar. I have the absolute pleasure to introduce my own PhD student, Isral Naska, who is doing some amazing work. A little bit of a background to Isral. Isral has actually come to us here from Indonesia. Um, uh, Actually, as an accomplished lecturer, he has been teaching Arabic the education departments at the Muhammadiyah University. And he is currently, I think, Israel, it's your third year of your PhD. The years are all a bit of a blur now during the pandemic, but you've worked hard at getting to this stage. Your research interests lie in the sociology of language and religion, and your PhD is looking particularly at the Minangkabau people and understanding identity and its connection to religion. So we are greatly excited to hear your presentation today. Over to you, Isral, and welcome to everybody who is here.
First of all, thank you, Aman. Thank you, Jenny, for scheduling this meeting. And try to present. Okay. Thank you again for Aman and Jenny for having me in this meeting. So my name is Isral Naska. I am a fourth year PhD student in the study of religions department, University College Cork. As Aman explained to you, my research interest is about uh, sociology of language and religion. So I'm doing a research about how religious identity of Minangkabau people shape and form their motivation in learning Arabic. And today I will present about uh, memory and religious phenomena, a case study of Minangkabau Muslim community. So memory is I'm trying to use memory as the theoretical framework to analyze my data, and maybe some of you uh, didn't didn't know about Minangkabau yet. So I will show you a very short glimpse to Minangkabau ethnic. Their homeland is in West Sumatra of Indonesia. So if you look at the map, the world map, so you will find there like a tiny box. So the location is there. And today there are like 5 to 5.5 million uh, people are living in West Sumatra, and probably uh, five more than 95% is Minangkabau people. And for Minangkabau people, Islam is considered as core part of ethnic identity, and it is also matrilineal society. And now I will introduce you the relationship between Minangkabau people and Islam. So first European explorer he came from Portugal. Thomas Diaz already witnessed that Islam is found in Minangkabau during his visit in 1684. So in Minangkabau people itself, Minangkabau culture is like very highly rely on oral tradition, and to be honest, we don't find any written document about how Islam came to Minangkabau people, and the only first document about Islam about Islam in West Sumatra or in Minangkabau culture is the document written by Thomas Dias during this visit in 1684. And in 1803, Sufism Brotherhood in Minangkabau people did like a revolutionary movement in Minangkabau against Minangkabau traditional leaders who protect the practice of gambling, cockfighting, and opium use. And it caused like civil war in Minangkabau world, and it ended with a reconciliation in 1821, in which Islam is accepted as the ultimate law without having negate the Minangkabau traditional law system and the matrilineal system. And in the beginning of 20th century, Minangkabau became the center of Islamic reform movement in Indonesia. So all data I got from Taufik Abdullah, Azra Hadler, and Dobin. And now we go to what we intend to talk about in this discussion, which is about religious phenomena and how it relates to memory. So what is religious phenomena? And to understand this, I cite Emile Durkheim, the elementary form of religious life, in page 34. He explained that religious phenomena fall into two basic categories: beliefs and rites. The first are states of opinion and consist of representations. The second are particular modes of action. Between these two categories of phenomena lies all the separate thinking from doing. So uh, by citing Emile Durkheim, by citing this, it could be stated religious phenomena is human acts in their capacity as believers. So human acts in their capacity as believers. And now we are going to go to religious collective memory. Religious collective memory, as I told to you, I use this notion as the theoretical framework to analyze my data, and my understanding on religious collective memory rely on the notion on Hubwaks and Harvey Ledgers. Both are French sociologists. Uh, so in this slide, I will show you like main feature of this theory. So the first one is the connection between memory and religion is structural connection and inherent in the structure of religious group. So memory is always exists in religion. And the second, memory is found in every religious tradition and rite. And religious tradition is the manifestation of the religious collective memory. And religious memory is something social, which made Hubwak call it a collective religious memory. It is socially mobilized and it regulates personal memory. So if every human have personal memory, and our personal memory, our personal memories are regulated by collective memory, and one of the collective memory is collective religious memory. And the process of making religious memory meaningful and relevant to the present context is called the act of recollection. It involves remembrance, recalling the past, and then we reconstruct the memory that comes from the past to be relevant in our present days. And the last, language and gesture within religious studies and rites, such as found in the practice of anamnesis, are among the main instrument of recollection. So we are doing the recollection through language, through conversations, and also through social gestures. And recollection of religious collective memory, it is the effort and process in which believers recalling the memory of past event to make it relevant for the present days. So the question is, what is the past event here? So in relates to religion, the past event is the event when the founder of religion uh, found the religion in Islam. For the example, it will be related to the era of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad. And if we talk about Christianity, it will relate to Jesus and so on. And the recollection of religious collective memory made the religious identity of believers. So our identity, the identity of believers, such as Muslim, comes by recollection, by recollecting the past memory, the past religious collective memory. Such function is called normative dimension of identity. And it needs social context and encouragement or social pressure, language or conversation and gestures to make the process of recollection take place. And in this slide, I'm showing you my understanding on the process. So we have collective religious memory as the abstract thing, and then we have religious traditions and rites as the implementation or the externalization of collective religious memory. So, and then we do the recollection of our collective religious memory through our engagement in religious tradition and rites, and we need social context to do it. So we need also language to do it, and of course, as I explained before, we need the understanding on social gesture to do the recollection. Without social context, without language, so the recollection is impossible. And then recollection make social religious identity, and when we have social religious identity, then we generate religious phenomena, because we act as believers. People act as believers. People act with their identity of believers, so their action met social religious I'm sorry, their action met religious phenomena. And then we come to my research interest, which is about learning Arabic. So uh, in this using this framework, I I view learning Arabic as a religious phenomena. So it's maybe it's unique for some people, because Gardner and Lambert stated that motivation of learning a foreign language could be instrumental and integrative motivation. So the reason behind people learn Arabic is they want to use. I'm sorry. The reason behind people who learn a foreign language, because they want to use the language as instrument, like for career, for getting a job, and also the and another reason is integrative. Integrative means people want to integrate to the culture, to the culture of the language. For the example, maybe many Indonesian people loves watching Hollywood movie. So because they love the culture, they love the movie, they love the art, so they decide to to learn English. So it is integrative motivation. When it comes to the reason behind learning Arabic language, it could be different for some people. Many research, such as Seymour John, Hussein Ali, Jaspal, and Cole, indicated that learning Arabic among Muslims is aimed for religious fulfillment. So it is not instrumental, it is not integrative, but something religious encourage them to learn Arabic. And I'm sorry. And how it relates to religious phenomena, how it relates to recollection and collective memory. So the repression of collective religious memory made the strengthen the religious identity of believers. Social religious phenomena come from the social action of believers. So when Muslims learn Arabic, it comes from their identity. And as I said to you, uh, their motivation to learn Arabic, as my data show, they want to be more engaged in religious tradition and rites. When it comes to reading the Quran, they want to read it and understand it without relying to the translation. When they go to like 5 time prayers, my participants said that they want to be more understand to more understand the recitations. So Minangkabau participants viewed their learning activities from their perspective as Muslim. This is insights from some data. So the first participant I'm showing you here is female participant, uh, 79 years old, live in Padang, and a retired nurse. So I asked her, what do you think about Arabic? So she answered, it is an important language. Why is it important? How we could learn the Quranic without Arabic? She said, reading a translation is not enough. After paying attention to how Pak Damanik is the name of her teacher, explained the Quranic meaning, I want to learn more. So from this passage, we we know that it is not something instrumental, it is not something integrative, but it's something different. How about just reading the translation? It make us less understand, she said. We cannot take the essence of it. So the essence of the Quran. Then I come, I came with a question. I asked her a question. Some people said it is better to do salat 5 time prayer in our language rather than to do it in Arabic without understanding the meaning. And she said, I cannot do that. It doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. So she rejected the idea that we can do the 5 time prayer, 5 time prayer in our language, like in Bahasa. So from this data, we can see that learning Arabic among my Minangkabau participants is something aimed to fulfill religious needs. And this is the another data, male participants. Uh, he is young, 19 years old, living in Padang and a pupil or student of vocational high school in basic chemistry engineering. So the education is not religious education. And I asked him, how do you think about learning Arabic? And he answered, by knowing Arabic, I can understand little Quranic meaning word by word. I'm sorry. I know it not by reading a complete translation, but word by word. I find the word translation doesn't fit word by word translation. So after learning Arabic, he knows that uh, Quranic translation is not fit to word by word translation. And and did you ever learn Arabic before? No, I didn't. So it was first time for him to learn Arabic. How long have you learned Arabic here? I've been about 2 or 3 months. So it was last year. How about online learning? It started in September. So previously, he told me that he also learned Arabic online. Why do you want to learn Arabic? When I do Salat, which is 5 time prayer, I cannot concentrate. If I can master Arabic, I can understand what I recite during Salat. So it is uh, it is religious, another religious fulfillment. And it is the next participant, male participant, 38 years old, living in Padang Panjang, a teacher. Uh, why do you want to really master Arabic? most obviously, Arabic is the language of our religion. You can just read the Quranic translation to understand the Quran. I said to him, if you learn more about Arabic, you will know the translation in Bahasa, in Indonesian language, will not cope the Arabic meaning. It is an incredible language. And Muslims should do salat in Arabic. Not all of them will understand. What if to change the 5-time prayer recitation to Bahasa? So all Muslim here will understand. And and he and he responded, the idea shouldn't be existed. There are something in religious that shouldn't be modified. So he disagreed the idea of doing 5-time prayer not in Arabic. So what is the solution for those who do not understand? I mean the recitation of 5-time prayer. If you don't understand all, at least you can understand some, such as Al-Fatiha. And I also got female participant. Uh, she is young, 23 years old, living in Payakumbuh, fresh graduate in the study of management, Faculty of Economics. Didn't you finish your study at university? So I mean, why do you still want to learn Arabic? And then she said, I think it was hidayah. Hidayah is like Arabic word which means uh, guidance from the God. And I have done my hijrah. It is also Arabic word. It means from moving into more religious life. And I have opened my heart to teach. I have met new friends at a Tahfiz school, the school for the Quranic school. Uh, they have very good attitudes. They persuaded me to learn Arabic. At the time, I also knew that learning Arabic gave us a big pahala. Pahala means reward from God because it is different with other languages. So learning Arabic is like she wanted to learn Arabic because she wanted to get reward from God. So it is something religious. Before that, she said, I learn English. Learning English give us no pahala. So she said, learning English will not give, learning English will not make us, will not make God gives you reward. So that's why I learn Arabic. Even though it is not basic, no problem. I join it. Do you want to visit Arabic countries and live there? So this question is to test whether she got like cultural involvement, cultural interest to Arabic culture. She she answered, yes, I do. For what? And finally, he just answered, for Umrah, doing Umrah. I don't have a desire to live there. I will go only for Umrah. Umrah is like short visit to Saudi Arabia uh, to do some Islamic rituals there. So why do you want to learn Arabic? I want to understand the Quran without having to read the translation. I think Arabic is unique. Uh, so this answer uh, indicate that the motivation of learning Arabic is not instrumental, is not integrative, but something religious. So this is my presentation today, and I hope I get feedback from you for betterment of my work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isral. We can now move to questions and discussion points. If you want to put your hand up, or you can shout. Any questions or comments to Isral? Thank you. We've got a comment from Rachel saying she doesn't really have a question, but it's great to hear about fieldwork. Isral, maybe if I could ask you, have there been any comparable kind of research projects that you found like this in other parts of the Muslim world?
Yeah, I found research conducted by Seymour Journ in 2000. It was published in 2006. The research was conducted in the US. So the research is she compared the attitudes of Arabic Muslim and Christian Arabics, their attitudes toward Arabic in the city of Milwaukee in the US. So she learning Arabic, she found that like this. It is my language. Muslim Arabic Muslim nations showed more respect to Arabic compared to their counterparts, which is the Christian Arabic, Arabic Christians, the Arab Christians. So when she wanted to further, when she wanted to know more, and the Muslim group told her that it is important language. It is not only about our culture, but it is about the religion. So they established like Sunday school in which young generation learn Quran and learn Arabic for religious purpose. So it is of research that I found. So this research indicates that learning Arabic for Muslim sometimes is not something instrumental or integrative, but something religious.
And I think that's the very interesting point that you're making, because motivation for learning Arabic would be very different. But there is something to be said, as you presented there, from the kind of the religious the kind of the religious motivation. As I can understand this as a Muslim when I was growing up, and also I studied and learned Arabic because of my PhD, but also the kind of at the religious level of growing up with traditions such as the learning of Arabic, it's Fard Ain, and all of these kind of ideas that you can only truly understand the Quran, and growing closer to the Quran. So there's lots of traditions and kind of motivations to do that, and to draw closer to that. And now, what I've always found interesting, Israel, is this idea that we seem to think that language is something that that you use to interrogate knowledge, to think critically, to ask lots of questions. But I think there's something else that needs to be said when it comes to the motivation that some Muslims are doing, because it's reciting the Quran, getting closer to the Quran, but it's not doesn't necessarily have to be an interrogation or a deep critical inquiry. Would that be correct? But again, it depends from individual to individual. But I think there's on this question of motivation, it is, I think, absolutely fascinating to see what it is and why people do that.
Yeah. So thank you, Aman. So I think by considering the religious aspects of learning Arabic, we can give contribution to the existing theory. As I taught to you, learning foreign language, the theory of um, the theory about the motivation to learning foreign language. The existing theory said the motivation is instrumental and integrative, but my in my research in my field work, uh, it's look I barely find the motivation. Uh, I ask my participants, do you want to live in Arabic countries? Do you want to stay there or stay there? And most of them answered that I don't want to live there. I don't want to stay there. If I go to Arabic countries, it is just for Hajj and Umrah. So it is, yeah, it is religious, something religious, not
Mhm.
instrumental, not integrative.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. We have a question from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, do you want to? We have a written question as well, that I'm not quite I'm not quite understanding what the question is. Before I go to you, Elizabeth, can Isral, can you look in the chat box? There's a question there.
So I think he want to ask my opinion about learning Arabic. Because in Indonesia, the trend of learning Arabic is to encourage students to be able to communicate in Arabic.
Mhm.
But also many people disagree about that because what is the purpose of talking in Arabic when you don't want to visit Arabic countries? You don't have the interest to Arabic culture. Your interest to learn Arabic is just to recite the Quran, to be able to access the Islamic classical references. Why should we learn to be able to communicate, to be able to speak in Arabic? So it is also interesting to discuss. For from my opinion, according to my opinion, uh, when our student wants to learn Arabic because they want to because their aims is religious fulfillment. So I think we don't need to encourage them
Yeah.
to learn Arabic for communication. Just in
I think, Israel, this is quite fascinating because the relationship that Muslims have with Arabic is very complicated because it's also understood as a divine language. You know, where you have the Quran, and the Quran is understood by Muslims as something that is divine. The language is the language divine, and so there is lots of traditions about getting close to the Quran, memorizing of the Quran, honoring the Quran, venerating the Quran. And I think that it actually takes the language. I think we need a different mind to the way that we understand this relationship, because it's not like, well, I don't know, I'm thinking it's not like learning, I don't know, Spanish or learning Scots Gaelic. I mean, I think there's something else happening for individuals who are doing this. But I think this is fascinating research. Elizabeth, and then I see Tatsuma. So Elizabeth first, please.
Well, this is kind of conceptually piggybacking on that question, but I was just wondering if participants who want to learn Arabic, are they also interested in the historical context of like what the words meant at the time they were written? And I like an example for, with the New Testament, like,
Mhm.
like Jesus saying, "I'll turn the other cheek." I've had historical, uh, it, like professors of that say that it means kind of an fu actually in the context, because you take the your clothing to one side and you put your cheek out, and it's like, equivalent to what we would say now. And I was just wondering, is there any, like, with the participants wanting to learn Arabic, is there like, oh, like we would say this now, but it would be different then? Is that part of it? I know it's kind of an obvious question, but I don't know. So just curious.
So thank you, Elizabeth, for the question. Before doing my field work, I set many criteria for my participants. One of the criteria is they should come from like commoners. So in Indonesia, we have two types of education. The first one is like regular education, and the second one is like religious education. So every religion every religions in Indonesia have the religious education, and when it comes to my participants, I tried not to pick up my participants from Islamic universities, from madrasah. So the purpose is, of course, they are in Indonesia like commoners, do not understand well about Islam, do not have many insights about Arabic. They just learn Arabic because they want to be more religious. So how about something historical? Because most of them are beginners in learning Arabic, so they have no idea what.
But Isral, sorry to, but I think this is still so fascinating, because even like if you Elizabeth, this kind of takes us on to like hermeneutics and kind of commentaries of the Quran. Now, I mean, I could take you into all sorts of directions where, for example, Muslim feminists are kind of they're not saying no to the Quran, but they're saying no to a certain interpretation of the text. But this is actually way before that, which is a full 100% acceptance of the Quran in Arabic, which means you have individuals who are memorizing the Quran, who are reading the Quran in Arabic, and they're fully accepting that without actually interrogating it in terms of the meaning and the words, which I think is fascinating, because there's so much discussion, especially today, on kind of hot potato issues in society and amongst Muslims, but there's something still preserved in the memorization of the closeness that Muslims have to the text, which is something that Muslims generally will not question. I think that's quite fascinating. Tatsuma, and then I see James. Elizabeth, has that answered your question?
Yes, it's fascinating, and I can understand that tension, that there's like a respect and like a sacredness there. I just wondered if I understand like hermeneutics, and like people who are studying this like for a living are going to have a very different relationship, but I just was curious if the participants were like, and what does this mean in this time? And like, just
Elizabeth, I have met so many people who have memorized the Quran from beginning to end, and when I actually say to them, do you know what you're saying, and they have no interest in what they're saying, but they are spiritually, they feel religiously, they are energized, and I look at them and I'm like, wow, this is, I hate to say it, but maybe ignorance is bliss in terms of not being able to interrogate some of the language. But I think that goes into quite complicated, ideas of faith and all of these other kind of very, very interesting kind of avenues. Sorry, Tatsuma.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So Israel, hi.
Hi,
Nice to meet you again. After a long time. I've seen you have used a Durkheimian framework, which is great. I mean, and also you quoted the sociologist Daniel Hervieux-Léger, who is much follows into the same tradition, sociological tradition, started with Durkheim. However, the gap you spoke about, the gap between beliefs and rituals, which is characterized by Durkheim as a gap between representation and action, thinking and doing. You remember the slide, the gap between thinking and doing has been a little bit questioned over last decades. And well, if we think about the work of Pierre Nora and on the lieu de mémoire, the places of memory, which has become a very important paradigm in memory studies and also applied to religious discourses, we may think more in terms. I mean, we may somehow need to bring into this analysis also places and materiality, places of memory, materiality. I mean, the discussion by Pierre Nora is about monuments, for example. But in your particular case, I was thinking about places of learning. So would you please talk a little bit about the places where your informants are learning, where they're working, and whether this particular environment has any effect on the way they learn and the way they practice religion?
Okay, so about the places of learning, I met the participants in group, and interestingly, they learn Arabic not in most of them learn Arabic not in schools or in course, but they make group, go to the mosque and invite a teacher, some teachers to teach them. So the activity run in mosque. Most of the activities run in mosque, and yeah. So about the environment. So it's like when you see people learn Arabic, learn a foreign language, which is Arabic in this case, in mosque. So yeah, it is, yeah, how can complain? It is something very very religious, and yeah, um many of participants already got a job. Some of them teacher, mathematics teachers, some of them farmers, some of them yeah, retired, and some of them like professional in meaning business. And so it is very very interesting to find them learning Arabic in mosque, in religious place, in religious sphere, in religious condition after doing 5-time prayer. So it really relates to traditions, in my opinion.
Does that answer your question, Tatsuma? Do you want to come back or something on that?
No, it's okay. There was also a question by James who raised his hand.
Hi there. My question's a little bit related to Tatsuma's, actually. It's a very interesting presentation again, Isral. I remember your presentation last year, and you know, it's interesting to see how the ideas have developed and the field work has come into the into your research, which is great. You know, I'm constantly sort of relate what you're saying to a Christian context, and of course there's no Christian equivalent to Arabic. No one single language, in the sense that, you know, the early church fathers in Christianity had always worked between sort of Greek and then later Latin, but they also then, you know, in the 4th century began to learn Hebrew and went back to the original Hebrew text, and then more, you know, other sacred languages evolved, Coptic in Egypt, Syriac, Old Church Slavonic. But they had this notion of sanctified by ancient usage, which kind of, as decades and centuries passed, the use of a language itself sanctified it within this, within the liturgical context, or within the context of organized kind of community practice, if you like. And so within the church, for example, you know, a language that had been sanctified by its very usage took on a new status. So I was just interested in the local languages, you know, that are used beside Arabic, whether the continued usage of them for religious purposes generates a status for them and fixes forms within those languages that wouldn't otherwise be. So they may be related directly to translation from Arabic that take their shape and take their form and become sanctified, if you like, by that usage. And the reason it kind of came to me there was because it reminded me something from my own PhD research, where, you know, I was working with Turkish-speaking Orthodox Christians. So the vocabulary of religion, some of it came from Islam, but another strain came from Christianity. And whenever they talked about prayer, that was like an interior prayer that was the use of their own language, or private prayer, it was dua etme, so dua. But whenever they used referred to corporate prayer, it was molitva, which is from Church Slavonic, and it took place in the church. There was a very clear distinction between these two different types of prayer and the languages that were engaged in them and the statuses attached to them. So I just wondered if there's a kind of a dynamic within language use in Islamic communities that, okay, the status of Arabic is fixed, but the other languages that surround it, do they gain like prestige and sanctification through a dialogue with Arabic? Sorry if that's a very complicated question.
I would answer in Indonesian context.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
More clearer than me. So in Indonesia, when you want to explain like religious thing, so of course you will talk in bahasa or in local languages. And when you go to the prayer, and when you hear to like religious speech, so we can say that all of the speeches are delivered in local language, but the base of speeches should be from like Quranic sentence. So what people are doing in Israel is you read the passage from Quran and then you translate it and you explain it to people. So based on my observation, if you can do like language analysis, you can do language analysis. You can explain to people like from the perspective from the perspective of Arabic. So the people will love to hear that. People will think you have you are the authoritative persons to explain about the Quran. So it happens. So how about the language? So Arabic is still sacred for its own sake, and the language that people use to explain the Quran is still become ordinary language. So it doesn't change in Indonesia context, but I don't know in other places.
If I can, that's a very, very good question, and I'm just actually thinking about it from Pakistan. So in Pakistan, you would use the word, for example, I wouldn't hear somebody saying salat, so they would say namaz. But it's interesting because what this leads us towards is that even though we're talking about a divine religious text language, there's something still alive in Arabic, and Arabic is then, as a living language, is in the Arab world. And the Arab world, for example, has a very particular form of religiosity of Islam. So in the most generalized, lumped up together way, if we were to associate Arabic with Saudi Arabia, which is a huge generalization, but our minds sometimes are generalized in that way, Saudi Arabia has a very particular form of Islam, which I think at some level does creep in to how we then, this kind of tension between the local and the divine, and then how that's lived out in Saudi Arabia. I don't know about Indonesia, but in Pakistan, there's this continuous tension about trying to understand Islam in Arabic, associated with Saudi Arabia, where you have the king who is saying that the king is the custodian of the two holy mosques. This adds another layer of religious kind of pressure to understand Islam in a particular way. But then in how language is used. One other thing that James, as you were saying, that made me think about, just one small example: amulets, and creating small, in Pakistan we call them ta'weezes, which would have sections of the Quran written inside it. There is lots of people who would say, oh, this is not a good thing to do. And again, it goes back to that tension between understanding something that would be local back to the language of the Quran, that divine language, and I think going back to how it is understood as alive in Saudi Arabia. So I think those are also issues which I'm sure, Isral, are happening, are complicated in Indonesia as well. I know when I was in Bali, I saw very, very interesting forms of Islam which were overlapped in all sorts of localized Hinduism and Buddhism. So I think at some level that complicates language to religiosity as well. Isral, you have the last word. Anything you want to comment on?
So yeah, my last word is when we talk about Arabic, based on my observation and my research, people in Indonesia, I think, can differentiate between Arabic for religious purpose and Arabic for, like, let's say, secular purpose. So for them, Arabic for secular purpose is less meaningful for them, because people will not go to Arabic countries for work, for learning and other secular things. But Arabic is really, really valuable for some people in Indonesia, for some religious group in Indonesia, in terms of religious purpose. And when it comes to really talking about religious purpose of Arabic, we should educate people that not everything come from Arabic is religious thing. So I found in Indonesia, when we just write like a sentence in a word in bahasa, but using Arabic scripts. So be careful on that. It comes from the Quran, so it's funny, I think. But it shows the sacred thing of Arabic. And thank you for the questions and the comments.
Thank you, Isral, for a thought-provoking presentation. And I have to say that I don't want to speak too soon, but I think we will soon be celebrating the completion of your PhD. So we're quite excited about that. So you've done tremendous work here, and you should feel very proud of that. I'm going to hand you back to Jenny, who's going to tell us what's happening next week. But thank you, everybody, and it was a pleasure to share this presentation. Over to you, Jenny.